You're given a 12 by 20 grid where some of the cells in the grid are numbers. You need to shade in certain regions of the grid and leave certain regions of the grid unshaded. All shaded connected regions need to be rectangular. This includes squares, so 1 by 1, 4 by 2, 2 by 2, 10 by 1, etc. All unshaded connected regions need to be unrectangular. The numbers you see need to match the size of the region they are in, and that applies to both shaded and unshaded regions. This is how I did it. To represent a shaded region, I'm going to use this gray opaque, and then to represent the unshaded regions, I'm going to use this pink, something like that. So to start off here, the ones in this are basically freebies. The only way a one can exist here is to be a square and of a single cell, and so we know it's shaded because the dark regions, again, need to be of a rectangular shape. One thing that we can immediately do whenever we fill in any shaded or unshaded region is we know that the orthogonally adjacent cells to each shaded region are basically going to be the opposite color of the region. For example, here, this is a shaded region. We know for a fact that these orthogonally adjacent cells are going to be unshaded regions, again, represented by the pink. So I can immediately mark these four as pink on both the left and the right. Now, the next thing I did is I expanded on this bottom right section here. So because this 7 is unshaded, we know that this 8 is going to be shaded. And we know this because if both the 7 and the 8 were unshaded, they'd basically be making part of the same region, but they would have a number 7 and a number 8 in there, and the region can only be of one size, either 7 or 8. It basically wouldn't work. We know that this 8 is going to be a shaded region. Because it's a shaded region, we know that it has to take on a certain shape, a rectangular shape, and so it needs to be something like this, or like this, or let's say the 12 and 4 weren't here, then technically also it could be a really long rectangular region like this. But again, the 12 and 4 is there, so we can't do that. So we know it needs to be either this 4x2 rectangle or this 4x2 rectangle. One thing we can do to figure out what it would be is according to that first rule, right? Whenever we finish a region, we know that every orthogonally adjacent place outside of that region is going to be of the opposite color, something like that, right? And so if we were going to use this top rectangle here, then we know that every single one of these orthogonally adjacent spots is going to be unshaded, and that won't work because it's basically connecting this 3 and the 12, and then we have the same problem that we had as to why we couldn't have the 7 and the 8 occupy the same color. And so with only 2 options for the 8, we basically know for sure that this 8 rectangle is going to look like this. And now again, we can kind of follow a pattern here and fill in every orthogonally adjacent spot with an unshaded pink region. I'll start to go a little bit quicker from here, but I just wanted to explain some of these rules in the beginning so that you can understand why I'm making certain decisions that I am. After this, I believe I went to the middle. Now, this middle 3, 4, 6, 5, I'll kind of explain my mindset and thinking here. So because shaded regions need to be rectangular, they're generally going to be even numbers. So I already had a hunch that the 4 and the 6 were going to be shaded, and then the 3 and the 5 were going to be unshaded. Let me just mark down the right color. This hunch was correct, but I'll also explain why I knew for sure that this was the case. Like, let's assume the opposite for now, right? Let's assume the 4 and the 6 are unshaded and the 3 and the 5 are shaded. The only possible ways that the 3 could be shaded is either a rectangle like this or a rectangle like that. And for the 5, again, it's going to be a rectangle like this, and we can't have a rectangle going down because that would overlap with the 8. According to the other rule that every adjacent spot needs to be pink, this is basically going to be impossible because this 4 region is immediately being assigned at least a size of 5 just by this 5 being this long. And so we know for sure, just based on that and some other things, but mostly based on that, that the 4 and the 6 are not going to be the unshaded regions here. We know that it's going to be the 3 and the 5 that are unshaded. First, I started with thinking all the different ways that this 4 could be shaded. So it could be 4 up like this as a rectangle, 4 over to the right, or it could be a 2x2 like this. Let's kind of imagine what would happen with each of these, right, with an unshaded. So if it was this straight up and down rectangle, we'd have to do something like this. And again, this forces this 3 to be a size 4 at least, and that won't work, so we can eliminate that rectangle. With this rectangle over to the right, let's try filling that in. So that's of size 4. Now let's look at this 6, right? So this 6 could be something like this, it could be something like this, or it could be something like this. We immediately know it's not this long one for the same reason that it couldn't be the long 4. Again, we also immediately know it's not this long 6, and I'll explain this just in case. because this is 3 and you may think, oh, that's okay, but the pink section or the unshaded section cannot be a rectangle, and this is immediately a rectangle, and so it couldn't be just this 3. We'd have to make it non-rectangular, but that would increase the number to 4, and so that wouldn't work either, and so we can basically delete this. And so now we know that this 6 is going to be this downward 2x3 rectangle. Because of that, we can basically assign these unshaded dots on the outside of the 6. And this is true for sure, and we were trying to figure out this 4 rectangle, but if it's the 4 long rectangle, that would mean that this 5 is basically too big, right? That's 6, and so that wouldn't work, so we know that it's not going to be this long 4 rectangle. And so right there, we've already figured out what the 4 shape is and the 6 shape is, and we can pretty much figure out exactly what the 3 shape and the 5 shape are going to be afterwards, right? Because now let's put in the adjacent unshaded for the 4, remove these 2. We have our 3 section right here. Now in the same way that we need to basically cut off the shaded regions, we also need to cut off the unshaded region because it can't be any bigger than the 3. We've already hit our maximum size for this, and so we basically need to cut it off with these shaded regions. One other thing I'll mention right here is that these 11s, we need to think about if each one of these 11s is going to be either shaded or unshaded. If we look at this 11 and we try to make it shaded, it needs to be rectangular, and there's nothing that divides into 11 cleanly so that it can be rectangular except for 1, and so it would basically need to be a really long rectangle, but that's not going to work. And so we know that these 3 11s are going to be unshaded and all part of the same unshaded region. Any little things we can plug in like this is going to make our life a little bit easier down the road. So the next step, let's figure out this 5 right here. So there's only a couple places we can actually place an unshaded addition to this 5 that's actually valid. We can't go here because that would connect it to these other 2. Now we're at what, 5, 6, 7, it's too big. And again, we know we can just immediately mark that as shaded then. And we also know that this section right here would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it would connect with the 11. It's just a whole mess. That doesn't work. So again, let's make that shaded. And so we're really only left with 2 possible ways we can increase this 5, here or here. Let's just try this one. I forget which is right, but if that was the true solution, then we would need to close off all these barriers, and we can immediately see that I don't think this is going to work. Yeah, because if this 8 is shaded, then it would need to mean that we need to create some kind of shaded region, and that means either like a 4x2, something like this, or like a straight 8. So we can't do a 4x2 in any direction except down, and we can't do a straight 8 in any direction. And we know it's not this 4x2 because this will connect to like these regions here, and now this is a non-rectangular shape. We can basically assume that the last part of this 5 section is going to be this dot right there. So let's fill that in, and again, cut off the section. And we can also cut off some more of this, right? Because these 2 spots right here, they can't be shaded, because then this makes this shaded section non-rectangular, because we've got this weird sort of pyramid thing going on. So we can immediately fill that in with unshaded. And now that I mention it, we can also do that up here on the left, same idea there. And now let's think about how we can proceed from here. This 8 right here, this cannot be shaded because we can't make a rectangle with this in any way because it's connected to this one up here, and we can't connect this one up here to make a rectangle that's of size 8. We basically know for sure that this is going to be an unshaded 8, and if this is unshaded, we know that 12 is going to be shaded. The only way this 12 can be shaded is just a 6x2 right here. So let's just fill that in. Now let's fill in all the adjacents as unshaded. Okay, this reveals something right here. And this was actually the first mistake I made. So when I was originally doing this, I wasn't thinking about these 9s to be shaded. I had marked them as unshaded because I couldn't think of how the 9 could be shaded. And I got stuck on this for a little bit. I realized that we could just make this a square. The way I got back to this was basically by counting this unshaded section here with a 9 here and a 9 here. If I count this out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I knew that there could be nothing else added to this unshaded section. Anyways, because of that, the only ways these 9s can be shaded is with this square right here. Again, fill out the adjacents. Let's do these bottom right 4s. We've got a couple numbers down here, right? We've got the 7 unshaded that we need to figure out what's going on with that, and then we've got these 4s here, and we technically don't know if they're unshaded or shaded, but I guess we know this one is at least shaded because it can't connect to the 7 because then it's part of the same section. So we know that one is shaded. The only way this can be shaded is either like this or like this. If it was shaded like this 4x1 rectangle, it would cut off the 7, and the 7 couldn't expand to be of size 7. And so we know that this is not the way to do it. And so we know it's this way. Adjacents, boom, boom. Okay, now we're at 6 for this section. There's really only one place we can go here, because if we go here, expands us to 7 and then 8, and now we're 1 too high. So we can only expand to there. And now again, let's cut off this section. There and there. One more thing we can do here is that this pink dot right here, we can't box this in like this because then this unshaded region becomes a square and we can't have an unshaded region any type of rectangle. So we need to add an unshaded there so that we ensure that it will never become square. Now we can tackle this sort of like empty 8 section here. Let's first identify whether these 8s are going to be shaded or unshaded. These two we haven't marked yet. I can't see any way that these could be shaded because we can't go up 8, down 8. We can't go, I don't know, to the right 8. So these are going to need to be unshaded because there's simply no shaded way of coloring them in. And if we know they're unshaded, then I think my first instinct was maybe that they're connected to this 8 down here. So maybe like something like this, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I was thinking, oh, maybe that works. But the problem with that is that we would then need to cut off, again, the sides with a shaded region. And if we did that, we get some problems. For example, the problem we have is that this section is now non-rectangular. We can't have that. So we know that we're not going to be connecting these two 8 regions here like that. If we know we're not going to be connecting them, we need to think of how we can expand this section down here to 8 without touching this. The only way to do that is here, 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 here. Now we're at 7. We need to expand to one more spot. We can't go there because it would expand us to too many. Same reason there. The only way we can expand is to here. Now we know that's the 8 section there. So now let's fill this other part in to cut it off. We know that this won't be shaded because this is going to be non-rectangular. So we can fill this in as unshaded. And now this connects together this section. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I guess we also know that this is going to be unshaded because we need to keep this rectangular shape for these two. And now we have our 8, this unshaded region. Let's cut it off. So something like this. So make sure that these don't become non-rectangular. We can also add a shade here. Same here. This was another spot that I got stuck at for a little bit as well. So this 3, I was drawing this out as, oh, it could be an up 3 or to the left 3. And I thought those were the only two possibilities. And I tested out all these and it wasn't working. And I'm like, what's going on here? But I didn't realize that I could also do that. Again, stupid mistake that cost me some time, but I pushed through it. You can go test out those other two on your own to figure out why they don't work. But I'll tell you right now, they don't work. Let's just add these unshaded regions outside of this 3. Now we're presented with this 4. So we don't know if this 4 is unshaded or shaded. So what makes sense? If it is unshaded, it needs to be of size 4. And so we need to connect it somehow, and we can go here, here, and now we're kind of at our limits, right? We can't connect to any of these or else it becomes way more than 4, connects to other numbers. We have lots of issues. So we know that this 4 is going to be shaded. I guess there's a couple ways we could do that, right? We could do something like this. Yeah, we do something like that. Let's assume this square on the left here. If we do that though, and then we start to cut it off, it connects the 12 to the 11. That does not work. We basically know it's going to be just this 4 by 1 off to the right. Let's cut off this section now. So what I did next here was a little bit of a guess. This 11 section is getting pretty close to 11 at this point, right? So we've got 6, 7, and then once we start to fill in some of these, it starts to get a little bit bigger. I knew that we were probably gonna have to cut off a lot of these, so I just knew that with this 12 and this 12, there was a really good chance that we were going to be connecting these with a shaded region. You know, it kind of works out nicely. It's just like a 6 by 2. It looks easy. So I just kind of took the liberty and assumed that, and it ended up working out. I'm gonna tell you that right now. That's why I'm shading that in. But I'm sure you could use some of the processes we used before to prove why it has to be that. But that's basically what I did. So again, let's fill in these outside here. Let's focus on this 11 section. So now we're at 6, 7, 8, 9, and we basically just need to add 2 more. So we could add it here, but that would connect over here. So we can add it right here though. That adds 10, and then this will last 11. Cut off this section now. And I guess I never touched on it, but this 12 section here, this shaded 12 section, we can count that as like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So let's go to this 12 section at the top. Again, just looking kind of convenient. We start to count this up like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It looks really obvious that we could just add that 1, have this 6 as a shaded section. So let's do that. Let's cut that off. Let's go down to the bottom here to this 4. Again, we don't know if this 4 is shaded or unshaded. Let's think about all the ways it could be unshaded first. You know, it could be something like this for this 4, and then maybe this 4 will go like up like that. But again, now we need to assign pink regions to right here, and then that would connect to this 4, and that would become more than 4. If we did this straight up like this, then again, we need to connect these regions to 4 here. Now this is like a straight rectangle of unshaded, so that won't work. If you run through the different possibilities, the only conclusion is that this is going to be a square. Mark off the adjacents. Boom, boom. There and there. Let's assign these colors. This 15, it would be pretty hard for this to be a shaded region. To make this rectangular, we need like a 3 by 5, something like this. And that can't happen with a shaded region. There was only the possibility of this being unshaded. That in turn makes this 4 shaded. This 4, we can mark as either this region or like this, right? The next step I took here, this whole top left section took me a while. I think it was probably designed that way to be like the toughest part of the problem, but these 10s, I thought they just looked too easy to work out in like this kind of kind of way or this kind of way. I first started with this bundle of right 10s. I thought of all the ways we could bundle 10 with these right 10s specifically. So there's that. I could do something like that. You could also have like an up rectangle like this. I think that's it. Or no, I guess technically we could also have this where it just hits that rectangle right there. Okay, let's try to break these down one by one. So this top up and down 5x2, this would leave this 10 here on the right as an unshaded region. And that becomes problematic because we're kind of locked off to this small section here, and this 8 is also unshaded. And there simply aren't enough unshaded cells to go around for both the 10 and the 8. I knew it wasn't this top 2x5. So I was left with these last 3. I guess we'll focus on this one next. If that one was the case, then we would need to fill in all of these as unshaded, and this 8 has basically nowhere to go because now we're at 4 for this 8, and the only place we can go is here, and that would expand this to greater than 8. So I knew that wasn't meant as well, and so we can eliminate this one. This rectangle right here was another consideration. If we again assume this, then if we begin to count this out, this gets kind of tricky for the 8 and the 10 to kind of live in the same area. So for this to hit 10, we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we need to hit either connect to the 8, which we can't do that, or if we go here, then it becomes greater than 10. Actually, this is exactly 10, but there's no way for this 8 to expand to the full 8 that it needs. And so I knew that it was not this section either. And so, and again, I wasn't totally sure that this is correct, right? Because theoretically speaking, these 10s could be unshaded, or just these like 3 10s on the right could be unshaded, and maybe there was, you know, like something like this with these 10s on the left. I didn't know for sure, right? But I basically found this to be the most promising one and followed through with it. And this took a lot of guesswork, so I'm not gonna like walk you through every little tiny detail I made on the guesswork. I don't want to bore you enough. I feel like this video is like boring enough already. But anyways, I knew that this was basically the most promising way for us to get through this problem. So I believe next I began to think about this 10 and how it could connect to these 10s, because it didn't really look like we had enough space for unshaded regions here to both capture the 10s and the 8. I suppose off the bat, let's do one more thing. Let's throw a shaded right here because we can't have the 10 connected to the 15. We know we can't go here because this will connect to the 8. We know we need to go somewhere to get this to the 10 count. So we go right there. Now we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we need one more. And so we could think it's maybe something like this or like that or like that. What ultimately gave this away for me was this, the fact that this is a shaded spot right here. It gave me a clue as to what these 6s were up here. It might be easy to look at all the other corners of the grid and be like, oh, this 4 was just a square, this 4 was a square, this 6 was like a simple 2x3, and to assume that this is also going to be a 2x3. And maybe it looks like it could be a 2x3 right here, but if you add on the unshaded regions, now our region is more than 10, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And so I knew it couldn't be that. And so another thing that kind of held me up was thinking of what we could do with these 6s. And, you know, there's a couple different thoughts that come to mind. Maybe you do something like this. Now this 6 would have to be unshaded and it would have to connect to like the 10 or the 15, so that wouldn't work. And what I actually ended up discovering is that this 6 is going to be an unshaded section. So I believe the first iteration I did was this. And so I put that down, I cut it off, so shaded, 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 and then I added this to complete this 10 section here. You know, now we're at 10, and now again, let's cut this section off, so like this. Then I expanded this 8 to try to capture the 8, but the problem I ran into here was that this is an 8, right? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so I was thinking, like, how can I move this top section around or shuffle it around to keep 10, but also to add 1 to this part so I can get the 8? And what I came across is that I need to change this 6 unshaded section. So if we go back to that, I basically realized that this is the way to do it. And so let's fill in the shaded like that. And now we can add this unshaded as a 10. Now we've hit our 10 count for this 10 section. Now let's cut it off. Now we've basically just earned ourselves an extra little spot to connect to the 8. So now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And from here, it was pretty easy because there's only so many things that can happen, right? These 15 sections are touching. If you kind of count how many empty cells are here, we kind of knew these 15 sections were going to touch. There's not 30 cells left. There's really only more in the ballpark of 15. We begin to think about how we can fill this out. I think the first step is which one of these 4s makes more sense. If we keep this one right here and we begin to fill this out, we have too many dots, right? So we've got 5, 10, 14, 18, 21, and 25. You know, that's way too many. So I knew that probably couldn't be the solution. There are ways we could try to cut off this, right? So we could do something like this where maybe we cut off this section, but then it's still going to connect to the 15 the other way around, and now we're just at 24. And so it seemed like the other 4 was probably the way to go here. Let's see what this looks like with this 4. Filling all this in for pink, again, we have the same problem. This counts up to 25. But now we can actually cut off right here. And now if we get this little top section, we have 5, 10, 15, and that works. This is basically the final grid. The question, what they actually ask us as the answer is, the answer to this puzzle is the product of the number of unshaded cells in each row. Let's go back and let's tally that up. 8, 0, 9, 3, 2, 1, 1, 0, 3, 3, 6, 0. And that was the correct answer. This is a little bit before the answers are revealed, but you can see I submitted this a day or two ago. There's my name right there. That's how you do this puzzle. See ya.